David Gisbergen could join the Cup Series full-time in 2025, and Noah Grace could either end up at JGR or RCR in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start and talk about the 2025 Daytona 500. As it was announced on Friday that 2025 Daytona 500 tickets are officially on sale. The 2025 Daytona 500 is going to take place on February 16th, and we're expecting it to potentially be a sellout once again in 2025. I'd like to go next year. I'm glad to see tickets are finally on sale. I think this is absolutely huge. Hopefully this race can be a sellout, not just in the grandstands, but also in the infield and other areas of the racetrack as well. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Connor Zilisch. As Connor Zilisch won his first Mazda MX-5 Cup race of 2024 this past weekend at Mid-Ohio. Connor Zilisch continues to do a lot of really impressive and great things out on the racetrack, continues to win some big races, obviously won a Sebring 12 Hours early in the year, also won the Rolex 24, and has got some Xfinity Series races scheduled with Junior Motorsports and also more truck races scheduled with Spire Motorsports later this year. But it's another huge accomplishment for him. Congratulations to Connor Zilisch on winning the Mazda MX-5 Cup race. He's been really close to winning some races there this year. Congratulations to him on winning his first Mazda MX-5 Cup race of 2024 this weekend at Sonoma at Mid-Ohio. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jamie Chadwick. As Jamie Chadwick put up a dominating clinic in the Indy NXT race at Road America and picked up her first career Indy NXT victory. Jamie Chadwick currently competes full-time in Indy NXT with Andretti Autosport and Andretti Global, and she's been very close to winning races so far. She becomes only the third female driver, I believe, to win in Indy NXT. I believe Anna Beatrice and Pippa Mann are the other two drivers that have won in Indy NXT. It's a major accomplishment for her. She's done an incredible job this year. She's come close to winning a few races so far, and to see her finally pick up that first career Indy NXT victory, I think is phenomenal and absolutely amazing. Once again, congratulations to her on getting her first career win in Indy NXT. It's an amazing and great accomplishment. Once again, like I said, congratulations to her on picking up the win. It's really good to see her go to victory lane. I'm happy for her and glad to see she was able to pick up the victory. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Canadian Grand Prix. Now, while you have the NASCAR Cup Series race, the tail end of that going on in IndyCar about to start, you also have the Canadian Grand Prix. This is one of the more intriguing F1 races I've seen in a very long time. You had three drivers that dominated: George Russell, Max Verstappen, and Lando Norris. And this race had a lot of rain at the beginning, and he had a lot of drivers making mistakes and going off the track. Max eventually got the lead, though, after Lando Norris' team made a bad strategy call, and eventually Max Verstappen took control of this race. And Max Verstappen pulled out to about a 3 or 4 second lead on the final restart and would come off the corner and pick up, I think, his 6th or 7th victory of 2024, and now has around a 58 to 59 point lead over Lando Norris in the championship. Lando Norris comes home and finishes the second. A fantastic day for him. Lando probably should have won this race, but they made a bad strategy call. But once again, congratulations to Max Verstappen. It seems like the field has caught up to Max Verstappen in the last couple weeks, but if they can find a way to get through the strategies, I think Verstappen's still going to be very tough to beat through the rest of the year. Nonetheless, like I said, congratulations to Max Verstappen on winning the Canadian Grand Prix. It's a really huge and great accomplishment for Max Verstappen to win another Canadian GP. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the IndyCar race at Road America. While you had the NASCAR Cup Series race going on at Sonoma Raceway, you also had the IndyCar race at Road America. Kind of like how the Cup race was at the beginning of the race, this race was extremely chaotic, at least at the beginning. Linus Lundqvist actually won the pole, but got taken out early in the race by the rest of the competition. And unfortunately, we saw a lot of chaos where a lot of the major threats got thrown out. Eventually, Will Power, Joseph Newgarden, and Scott McLaughlin assumed control of this race, and Scott McLaughlin dominated a good portion, but Will Power was able to eventually pass, and he would come off the corner and pick up his first win in over 2 years. Will Power's last win had come at Detroit in 2022, and he's finally picked up his first win of 2024. He's come close to winning the last couple of years and gets his 42nd career IndyCar victory. Congratulations to Will Power. He absolutely deserved this win and victory, put the work into it. Won a pretty chaotic race, but nonetheless, like I said, congratulations to Will Power on winning the IndyCar race at Road America. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Road America once again. As it was announced earlier today that Road America has signed a contract extension as a track with IndyCar for the next few years and will return to the IndyCar schedule in 2025. Road America has always put on really good racing, not just in IndyCar, but in NASCAR. Obviously, NASCAR is not competing there in 2024, though they could end up there in 2025. But I think it's really cool to see Road America back on the IndyCar schedule next year. A lot of fans show up there. The attendance is always very great. And like I said, the racing is usually very outstanding at the track. So I think this is the right decision overall for them to get back on the schedule once again next year. I think it's at least 2 or 3 more years they're going to be working with them in 2025. But once again, it's really huge for this. I'm very happy for them. And like I said, congratulations to them on being back on the schedule once again. They've earned the right to be back on the schedule, and hopefully we'll get the IndyCar schedule not too far down the road, but it seems like we're starting to get some tidbits on the schedule for IndyCar for 2025. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Yuki Tsunoda. As it was announced on Saturday evening that Yuki Tsunoda has officially signed a contract extension with Racing Bulls or Visa Cash App Racing Bulls and will return to this team in 2025. The rumors and speculation, I think Helmut Marko revealed this on a podcast, something like that Yuki was going to be returning to this team regardless, but now it's official. Yuki Tsunoda, in my opinion, has been doing a solid job so far this year, and I feel like there's been a couple races that I go back to Monaco and a few other races this year where he's shown some flashes of brilliance, which is kind of crazy because I feel like this organization as a whole has been struggling for the most part. So I'm very excited to see Yuki getting the chance and opportunity. There was a chance he could have gone over to Red Bull this year, but we know that Sergio Perez has signed the extension with the team and organization. So once again, like I said, I'm glad to see that Yuki Tsunoda was able to go out and get this extension done. I think he's going to be at the team in 2026 as well, though I don't think it was confirmed in the press release yesterday. But once again, I'm very happy to see this and glad to see that Yuki Tsunoda will be returning to Racing Bulls in 2025. I think he's earned a contract extension, and I'm glad to see that he'll get the chance and opportunity to be with this team once again in 2025. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Green. Now, Austin Green, of course, competed in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race yesterday. It came across the line in a very impressive 4th place finish. He did get helped by a lot of strategy throughout the race and played strategy late in the event because it's very difficult to pass in the Xfinity Series race yesterday. But he's been very impressive in the races he's ran so far. I believe he finished in the top 7 at COTA. I think he finished in the top 15 the last race at Portland and was able to come across the line and finish inside the top 5 at Sonoma. Now, he does have a couple other races scheduled with them, including a couple ovals. I think Bristol's on the schedule, and there's a few other races late in the year that he's going to run on ovals as well. But his next race is going to be at the Chicago Street Course. Austin Green, of course, son of David Green. I really would love to see him get a chance and an opportunity to go full-time with Jordan Anderson Racing because I think that Austin Green is an extremely talented race car driver who always seems to get the best out of equipment. He's been really strong in Trans Am over the last couple of years. We know Peterson Racing and, of course, RCR has been really helping Austin Green out in a major and a big way. And I think Austin Green did a very solid job. I really hope someone's looking at him to go full-time next year as I think Austin Green did an excellent and a very solid job. Congratulations on a fantastic performance. I really hope someone's looking at him and hope he can get the chance and opportunity to be full-time with a team in the 2025 NASCAR Xfinity Series season. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Nitrocross. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Saturday morning that Travis Strana has finally spoke on the NASCAR Nitrocross deal. He says that this is going to be a partnership with Dana White and will be announced sometime around July 4th. He initially said that he was not really supposed to speak on this. We actually talked about this on the channel. It was one of the bigger stories of the episode, but it sounds like NASCAR and Dana White are talking very heavily about a partnership starting around the July 4th weekend as Dana White is going to fly out to the NASCAR headquarters either in Charlotte or Daytona Beach because NASCAR does have a headquarters in Daytona Beach right after the 4th of July comes around. This sounds like this is going to be this electric series with Nitrocross involved because Nitrocross, I believe, is electric if I'm not mistaken. And this is absolutely really, really huge to have Travis Strana working with the series as well. I think that this series could have a ton and a lot of success. And I think it's really cool to see that they're going to have a partnership with Travis Pastrana, who, of course, is racing NASCAR. He's actually trying to get guys like Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch to come over and race in the series, I believe. And I think it'd be really cool to see more NASCAR drivers get the chance and opportunity to come and race in Nitrocross. We saw Matt Craft to come over, obviously, because he said some really not so nice things about Great Laybetter. But I'm really intrigued to see when this will be announced. I expect to be announced next month. And it's pretty cool to see that Nitrocross is going to be getting involved in some sort of capacity. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR on Fox. Now, yesterday or a couple days ago when you're watching this was the final NASCAR Xfinity Series broadcast on Fox. The Xfinity Series has been on Fox since 2015, not exclusively because, of course, NBC has had that since 2015 as well. But we've seen a lot of great broadcasts, and Adam Alexander, in my opinion, has done an excellent job carrying the Xfinity Series broadcast for a very, very long time. As much as I'm not a big fan of Fox Sports in general and their coverage, I think Adam Alexander has done a very solid job with their Xfinity broadcast, and really up until this year, I would say, I feel like the Xfinity Series had generally been the best broadcast, but so far this year, it's been the Cup Series despite their broadcast just generally not being good overall. But at the same time, it is going to be sad to not see the Xfinity Series on Fox going into next year. But we all remember that the Xfinity Series is going to be going to the CW. Congratulations on a long and extremely fantastic tenure for the last 10 years. It sucks to see they're going to be leaving at the end of this year. But at the same time, if it means there's going to be growth, I'm glad to see them leaving. Hopefully this means there's some growth in the broadcast, like I said, can generally get better because I feel like the broadcasts have just been a little bit hit or miss. Hopefully this means the broadcast can get better with the CW starting in 2025. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Fox once again. Now, we talked about this on the channel, but it was reported, I believe, by Adam Stern that NBC was trying to find a way to get every single race on broadcast. Also, Marshall reported on this as well. They're trying to find a way to get every single IndyCar broadcast on main NBC. Well, according to Tony Donahue, who works, I think, with the IndyStar, a couple other groups, he says that Fox has now offered IndyCar a full network package, meaning that every single IndyCar race could end up on Fox starting in 2025. This is absolutely huge because obviously the TV deal has not been signed, but IndyCar has been in talks and discussions to go to Fox for next year. We know that the Cup Series will have less races there, and the Xfinity Series, of course, is moving over to the CW starting in 2025. So they're trying to find a way to fill up their space. Originally, it was reported that IndyCar races would be on Fox, FS1, and FS2. But now you've got an offer that's come back where it could be on only Fox for the whole entire year. If they take this deal, I think it's good, but at the same time, I still really don't want Fox covering races for IndyCar. I think the IndyCar broadcasts have been really good for NBC over the years, and I really hope NBC can find a way to retain the broadcasts, but they're obviously picking up the NBA more than likely next year, so that's another big reason why they're probably going to make this happen. We don't know when it's going to be officially announced. I know Adam Stern reported last week that announcement's probably not going to be coming to at least this week, and I really hope that NBC retains the deal, but it does sound like Fox is in really heavy talks and discussions to try to pick up the deal. We'll end up seeing what happens in regards to that because this definitely is a pretty big story going forward. I really hope, though, that IndyCar can find a way to send NBC next year because I think the broadcasts have generally been really solid and really good on NBC over the years. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Sieg and Parker Retzlaff. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Xfinity Series race yesterday, you saw the little bit of beef and squabbling between Parker Retzlaff and Ryan Sieg. Now, coming to the final 5 or 6 laps of the race, there was contact on the front straightaway between Ryan Sieg and Parker Retzlaff. Well, Parker Retzlaff retaliated against Ryan Sieg and turned him going up into turn number 1 for about 13 for 14 position. After the race, words were exchanged and they got into a verbal argument or kind of crazy argument that was taking place. The reporters were able to catch it, including Bob Pockers. Look, I can't really tell from the incident. I think that Ryan Sieg was the one who initially caused the incident, and then Parker just felt a little frustrated with Ryan Sieg about the situation. And I'm glad that Parker Retzlaff is standing up for himself. I get that he's young and Ryan's been in this sport for many years. What's wild about this, too, is the fact that Parker Retzlaff got his career started in Xfinity with a team like RSS Racing. So it's kind of wild to see. I wonder if there was some bad blood that came from that situation. Will we see beef between these two guys? Maybe, because they're both also fighting for a playoff spot currently at the moment. I think that Ryan Sieg and Retzlaff have shown some really good speed so far this year, and they've had some pretty promising and good runs throughout the year. So I think we're going to see more tension from these guys going forward, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see more tension between these guys and more issues going forward. I really hope that's not the case, but I do have kind of a funny feeling that we're going to be seeing Ryan Sieg and Parker Retzlaff in some more beef going forward in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kurt Busch. Now, 2311 Racing put out a tweet yesterday saying that Kurt Busch is back. Kurt Busch was spotted at his first NASCAR race in a very long time this week at Sonoma. I remember talking about this on the channel early this year, that Kurt Busch at least had been interested in coming back into racing in the sport. Carl was initially did last year, but of course he's not going to be coming back next year, or he might come back as a commentator. But I'm very glad to see that Kurt Busch at least is at the racetracks. I think a lot of us would love to see Kurt Busch come back and make a one-off. But if he isn't coming back to make a return, it would definitely suck because it wouldn't bring the closure the fans wanted. Because Kurt, still from what I understand, he needs to be medically cleared to make a return to NASCAR. But at the same time, he's been enjoying life. He was at the Monaco Grand Prix a couple weeks ago, and he's been doing a lot of things that he gets to want to do. And he's still working at 2311 Racing as an ambassador trying to grow the team. He's really helped 2311 Racing's performance get a lot better. Bubba Wallace is currently in the playoffs, and Tyler Reddick has been really solid this year and has had the most top tens of anybody in the field so far this year. So while they're not winning races, they've been extremely consistent. I'm so glad to see that Kurt Busch is still coming out to the racetracks. I think that's the most important thing for the team and organization as a whole. I think it's really huge to see. And nonetheless, again, very happy to see Kurt Busch back at the track. I really hope one day we do get to see Kurt Busch at least make a one-off return in the sport. But as of right now, that's not going to happen until he's medically cleared. I really hope it does happen soon, where he can be medically cleared and can get back on the wheel of a NASCAR Cup car. But the positive news is that at least he's at the racetrack and showing up on a week-by-week basis. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about stage cautions. Now, obviously, this year they re-added stage cautions back on road courses. Remember, last year there were no stage cautions on the road courses for the most part, started at Circuit of the Americas that went until the Charlotte Roval, but they re-added them for this year. Michael McDowell actually spoke on that with the media, and he says he's really not a fan of stage breaks at road courses, and he feels like the reason that he does not a big fan of it is because of the strategy. I get that today in the NASCAR Cup Series race that we saw a lot more strategy because we had a lot of cautions. But again, there was not a lot of passing on the racetrack. And unless you have some sort of strategy and chaos that takes place, or basically stage yells, you think that might break the strategy up. But instead, it really hurts the strategy in these races on road courses. I've said this for a long time. If you want to keep stage cautions at the oval tracks, fine. That is completely understandable. But I agree with Michael McDowell. I would love going into next year getting rid of the stage cautions once again for the road courses. I really enjoyed the races last year, like Indianapolis, though Waxahachie was not very good, but I enjoyed Indy and COTA for the most part, where you didn't have those stage cautions. And I get that you get the restarts because, let's be honest, the racing in the next-gen era at the road courses has not been the greatest overall. But at the same token, in same time, I genuinely would love to see them get rid of stage cautions going into next year, because I do truly believe that the racing will truly end up getting better. So I hope they make this change. I really hope they get rid of stage cautions next year. I have a feeling that they're not going to get rid of them, but I hope I'm wrong, because I would love to see them get rid of them. I do, like I said, believe it will provide much better racing for NASCAR overall, especially on the road courses, not just for the Cup Series, but for the Xfinity Series as well, if they were to go ahead and do this. So I hope going into next year, like I said, they do end up getting rid of stage cautions at these road course races. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, Kyle Larson, of course, went on to win the NASCAR Cup Series race earlier today, but there's a couple interesting stories surrounding Kyle Larson. The first one was about the waiver. Kyle Larson said he was relieved to get the waiver, and he hopes to not talk about the waiver situation ever again. NASCAR, like he mentioned a second ago, Kyle Larson has been approved for a waiver and granted, and it was announced on Tuesday that he got that waiver. It took NASCAR a very long time, and I think a lot of us are very happy to see that Kyle Larson got that waiver, and here is why. Imagine telling fans that the current regular season points leader, who missed the race, by the way, and just picked up his third win of the season, imagine telling them that the regular season points leader would not be eligible to be a championship contender. That would have been an absolute terrible and bad look on the sport. So I'm really happy that NASCAR made the right decision and right call to go ahead and give him the waiver. Because like I said, if they had not given Kyle Larson the waiver, I think it would have been an absolute terrible and a really bad look on the sport. So I'm glad that there was common sense made, and there's been rumor speculation they saw maybe Jordan Bianchi's video or something like that, which is why it took them a lot longer to make the decision. I do believe, like I said, that they made the right call and right decision, because we would have had a lot more repercussions that would have ended up taking place if they didn't approve the waiver for Kyle Larson. So I'm very happy that NASCAR used their brain for once in their lives and went ahead and made the right and executive decision, because again, it was the right call in my opinion. I think they made the right decision, and it's good to see the Kyle Larson's relief. I think this will probably be the last time I talk about the waiver situation, but if we had not gotten a waiver, I think there would have been a black cloud hanging over the sport. So glad to see that Kyle Larson has gotten a waiver, and glad to see he's also relieved that he won't have to worry about this waiver situation, at least for the foreseeable future. Probably never have to deal with it again, because I don't think it'll be coming up again in the near future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, we're going to talk about Kyle Busch later in the episode when it comes to him and Ross Chastain's wreck. But Kyle Busch spoke to the media right before the Cup Series race took place on Saturday, and Kyle Busch spoke about the tough stretch he has had very recently. He's hoping to keep his head down going forward and really focusing on trying to make the playoffs this year. We got to look at Kyle Busch's recent stretch and really this year altogether. Kyle Busch has struggled immensely so far in 2024. He's had a few top fives and he's had some top tens, and he's come close to winning a few races. He nearly won the Daytona 500 and nearly won at Atlanta Motor Speedway, and was very fast at Kansas and Dover as well. But outside of that, this A team has been extremely inconsistent throughout the year. And you think about this past couple of weeks. Darlington was a complete disaster. Got involved in a wreck in the truck race and was taken out of contention there by his own doing. Then he had other incidents later in the year. You go back, of course, to issues that happened in North Wilkes, where he got in that feud with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. And then, of course, he had the situation at Gateway where he wrecked with Kyle Larson. And then he had the Indianapolis crash during the Indianapolis test. And Kyle Busch didn't qualify very well, and while he was having a great race at Sonoma, he got taken out by Ross Chastain. Kyle Busch just needs to keep his head down, because while, yes, he's been struggling recently, the positive thing, if there's any positive thing to come from this, is that Kyle Busch is performing still okay this year, but at times it's been a very rough year for him. So I really hope that they can turn the corner around and he can get better throughout the rest of the year. Will he? Who knows at this point? But like I said, I really hope that he can keep his head down and focus on trying to win a championship. I think it's going to be very tough to win the championship this year for Kyle, but like I said, I really hope that they can start turning the corner and showing a lot more speed, because I feel like this team has been extremely inconsistent. Hopefully they do a good enough job and they can start performing a lot better, so we're not talking about this going forward, and hopefully Kyle Busch can go out there and start performing a lot better so he can absolutely make the playoffs in 2024, though I'm a little worried that he might not end up making the playoffs. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race and Worldwide Technology Race, which I attended, by the way, and had a lot of fun at, you saw the incident between Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson. On the white flag of stage number 2, Kyle Larson sent it to the inside of Kyle Busch and tried to make a pass. Kyle Busch was very frustrated with Kyle Larson, and they both had contact going to turn number 1. Kyle Larson at the inside of the rumble strips, and they both ended up crashing. Kyle Larson recovered and got a top 10, while Kyle Busch limped it back to pit road and unfortunately was out of the race. Kyle Busch was clearly frustrated with the situation and the incident, and spoke on that incident as well. But mainly the guy that spoke on it was Kyle Larson in the media center yesterday. He says he's moving on, and he actually took initial blame for the wreck, and he also said that he wasn't trying to go in the corner and have a dick measuring contest with Kyle Busch, which I found very funny from Kyle Larson. Going back to the incident, I originally thought I would put blame on both guys, and I still think that both guys are at fault for the situation. Kyle Busch is at fault for overreacting a little bit, but I feel like Kyle Larson's also at fault for sending it in the corner on the last lap. There's really nothing you were going to gain from this situation, and unfortunately they put themselves both in a bad position, and it took them out of contention maybe to go win, because while Kyle Busch didn't have the race winning speed he had last year at Gateway, he still was very, very quick out on the track and could at least got in the top 10. He wouldn't be in the position he's at now. So I'm glad to see that Larson's taking some blame for the wreck, but I still think Kyle Busch is also a little more at fault for the incident because they get held back. I still put it up to being more hard racing, but I feel like they could have absolutely avoided that situation and could have come clean there. So I really hope going forward that both these guys don't have issues. And it seemed like today there weren't any issues on the track because I think Kyle Busch respects Kyle Larson in a big way. I mean, he's one of the biggest supporters on Kyle Larson getting a waiver. So I'm glad to see they're both moving on from the situation, and I'm glad to see we can clear that up. I still think both are at fault in some instance for the wreck, and I feel like they could have been an avoided wreck in situation overall. Glad to see at least something came from this, and glad to see that Larson at least took some blame for the wreck, and now hopefully we can move on from the situation and the incident. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Todd Gilliland. Now, Todd Gilliland was speaking to the media yesterday in regards to getting the contract extension with Farmer Motorsports. Remember, it was announced earlier this week, we discussed this on the channel, it was announced on Wednesday morning that Todd Gilliland has signed a multi-year contract extension with Farmer Motorsports. Now, the number that he is going to run is not officially clear, but I would imagine more than likely he's going to be staying in the 38 car next year. Now, Todd Gilliland also spoke on the fact that he hopes to have input on his teammates for 2025, but he's been paying attention to the silly season market. We obviously know that Truex Racing is going to be shutting down at the end of 2024, and who could be his teammates going into 2025? We know that Michael McDowell is not going to be one of his teammates because Michael McDowell is going to be joining Spire Motorsports driving a 71 car in 2025. I most likely think his teammates are going to be these two drivers, Cole Custer and Josh Berry. And I think that Josh Berry is going to be a package deal with Rodney Childers. Josh Berry, Rodney Childers really like working together. And really, it's not just those two that want to work together. They're trying to bring the whole entire Ford team with them over. So we can see the number 4 car go over to Farmer Motorsports next year, which I find very cool. But I think that also Josh Berry's veteran experience and Rodney Childers' veteran experience as a crew chief is really going to play a crucial role if he goes over there. And we've been hearing rumors that Joe Custer has purchased a charter recently, and it could be that third charter for Front Row. And we do expect that we're going to see maybe Cole Custer go over and drive the 34 next year. So I think next year the lineup is going to be Todd Gilliland in the 38, Cole Custer in the 34, and Josh Berry either in the 36 car or the 4 car next season, or a number from Truex Racing. I'd imagine one of the SHR numbers is going to go to Front Row next year. I think it's a great move to keep Todd Gilliland around long term, though, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the rest of the silly season plays out throughout the rest of the 2024 season. But like I said, I do expect going through the rest of the year that we'll find out where other drivers are going to end up throughout the rest of the year. Nonetheless, very interesting to look at for sure. I expect that Todd Gilliland will have a little bit of play, and who gets the rides, we'll see what ends up happening, though, throughout the rest of the NASCAR silly season. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain once again. Now, I kind of spoke about this incident. We're talking about Kyle Busch's struggles throughout the 2024 season. But Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain have had a little bit of history and beef before. And coming to the final lap of the race, Ross Chastain and Kyle Busch are battling for 5th and 6th position. Both drivers having very solid and good runs. Ross Chastain moving up through the field, and Kyle Busch, who was trying to hang on and get a top 5 finish. Well, Ross Chastain completely misses a corner on the white flag and gets into Kyle Busch. Initially, Kyle Busch had left the racetrack. Ross said I think he said, speaking to PRN, that he did make a little bit of a mistake. And you actually look at the replay as well, that Ross Chastain just completely missed the corner and misjudged it there. Kyle Busch was clearly not happy with Ross Chastain about the incident. He said that he was having a pretty good day overall, and he says that one driver ruined his day, and that unfortunately was Ross Chastain. Initially, Kyle Busch crossed the line in 12th place, actually ran out of gas. Then he crossed the line in 17th after, and then they gave him back 12th position. So instead of being, let's say, like 20 or 25 points back, Kyle Busch is 13 points below the cutoff line. I think Ross Chastain made a little bit of a mistake, and he was more aggressive than we've seen him a lot of times this year. because we've seen Ross Chastain kind of trying to harness that growth and trying to be better as a race car driver. But at the same token, same time, you don't want to make a driver like Kyle Busch mad or upset, because if you piss off Kyle Busch, it really is going to be a bad day for you. And like I said, I think that Ross Chastain is clearly at fault. He completely missed the corner and jumps it up the track. And I feel bad for Kyle Busch because he was having such a good run today and was going to be in position to maybe get a top 5 or at least at worst a 6th place finish. There was no way he's going to go up there. And when he raced Kyle Larson fair and square and let Kyle Larson go, and Kyle Larson didn't have to do anything to get around Kyle. And I feel like Ross Chastain, he's got a lot of work to do as a race car driver to work on that. And I also understand Kyle Busch's frustration. And I think that Ross and Kyle hopefully will be able to talk it out. But like I said, these two have had beef before. You go back to Coda last year where Kyle Busch was very frustrated. Ross Chastain, not only was Ross being frustrated with Kyle, but Daniel Suarez was frustrated. And Alex Bowman was also frustrated at Ross as well in that situation. So like I said, I feel bad for Kyle Busch because it's been a struggle for him so far this year. I really hope things can get a turnaround for Kyle for the rest of the year, but I'm worried because that 18 has been extremely inconsistent throughout the whole entire season. Again, I'm hoping I'm wrong and they can turn the corner around very, very quickly. But as of right now, my concern still goes around. And hopefully we do get to see both these drivers turn their corners, because Chastain's had some pace and speed, but has been making some mistakes. And Kyle Busch also at points has been making some mistakes out on the track as well. So we'll see what ends up happening in regards to that. And hopefully both guys can continue turning the corner around and have good runs going forward into the future. And hopefully Kyle Busch can turn the season around relatively quickly. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen versus Austin Hill. Now, if you watched the Xfinity Series race yesterday, you saw Shane Van Gisbergen go back-to-back and pick up his second career NASCAR Xfinity Series win. But he had to earn it and had to go up against his arch enemy, it seems like, that being Austin Hill. Remember back at Circuit of the Americas, Shane Van Gisbergen was clearly on his way to victory lane there. All of a sudden, on the second to last restart, Austin Hill got into the back of Shane Van Gisbergen, and Shane went really wide up the racetrack. Then Shane gave him payback, but Austin Hill was not very happy. He tried to say that Shane basically got past clean, even though he didn't. But then on this situation, Austin Hill and Shane were battling hard going into turn number 1 for the win. And there was contact between both of the drivers. And Austin Hill went out in the grass a little bit and dropped back to 5th position. Then Shane, like I said, went on to go and win the race. Now, during the cool down and burnout lap where Shane was drifting, there was a really cool photo, I think from a guy named Justin, not mistaken. I think Jeff Gluck shared this, but there was a photo of Shane doing a burnout and a drift right behind Austin Hill, and Austin Hill was giving the bird and the finger. And Austin Hill then also spoke to the media, and he says his opinion is always wrong because of the keyboard warrior. Said that to Regan Smith and many of us watching. Shane Van Gisbergen basically says he was going for the win, and he says he doesn't want to race that way and think about that all the time, but he also realized the driver that he was going up against. Personally, I think it's completely fair game in this situation. It doesn't really matter the drivers to me. And if you look at the replay as well, Austin Hill didn't really give a full line to Shane. Shane was there on the outside, and I know Shane kind of got in the grass a little bit, but Shane, where was he supposed to go? And you're not going to back out in that situation, especially when you are going for a win and a victory. And Shane's trying to get as many points as possible. I get understand that Austin Hill, he's also trying to get as many points as possible as well. But at the same token, same time, I think Austin Hill has to realize that Shane is a better driver, at least on road courses, than him. And I feel like that Austin Hill, saying the keyboard warrior's comment, when he's been justifiably called out for incidents and mistakes, when he races people extremely heavily, I feel like he really has no room to talk. I get being frustrated and upset that he got run around the racetrack. Big deal. Shane had a better car than you. He was initially going to pass you. And if it was a different route, you wouldn't say anything. I get, like I said, why Austin Hill's upset. There's no denying he has every right to be upset and frustrated a little bit, but at the same token, at the same time, I also kind of don't get it in a sense. It was a big day for Shane to get that second win of the year. He's now 100% officially locked in the top 10 in the points. I'm really happy for Shane. I kind of understand the frustration a little bit, but at the same token, same time, I also don't really understand the frustration from Austin Hill in this situation, because Austin Hill's raced people with a lot of lack of respect, especially throughout the 2024 season. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about the charter agreement. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern on Friday and Saturday that NASCAR sent more proposals out for the upcoming charter deal that is supposed to be due at the beginning of 2025. According to Adam Stern, the France family would be able to buy NASCAR's charters starting in 2025 under terms of the latest charter offers to teams. Initially, teams has said no on this, but it sounds like this could go through if this charter agreement proposal ends up going through. Another big thing that we all saw is that it also includes plans for a cost cap to limit team spending. There's also another thing of private equity firms where if you're in equity, you can't buy out the charter completely. You can only buy a percentage of that charter from 25 to 30%. Let's begin by talking about the France family coming in. I am personally not a big fan of the France family owning a charter, and the big reason for that is because of the conflict of interest situation. This kind of like with Roger Penske owning an IndyCar team, right? He runs a series, but also owns an IndyCar team. And then you have situations like the scandal that ended up taking place with the push to pass, and then people start calling Roger Penske a cheater, even though he runs the operation, but he's not fully focused on the operation. He's really focusing on that. So I'm not a big fan of that. Now, Jim France does own Action Express Racing or a part of that, so he does have some interest and does have some ownership in an organization, IMSA, but I personally just would not be a big fan of him having interest in being an owner of a charter. I think if they wanted to buy into a charter, that's one thing, but they shouldn't have full control of a charter because that would really change the game in a big way. Let's go to the other one, the cost cap. There's been a lot of talk about these teams asking for more money. And NASCAR now is going back to the teams and saying that we want you to limit how much you're going to spend. I'm very interested to see how much they're going to let the teams go with if this proposal goes through. I wonder how much limit is it going to be. Is it going to be per the whole organization or the whole team? Because if it's per car, Hendrick Motorsports and Joe Gibbs, who are going to be grandfathered in with the new charter agreements, they're going to basically have such a huge advantage over the teams that have like one or two because they're not going to have all the R&D resources among other things. I really hope that when it comes to a cost cap, and I'm not a big fan of cost capping as well because you have people that end up losing jobs, and that's a big problem right there because a lot of times they cut people from the team, and we don't want cutting. We want cutting on certain areas when it comes to spending, among other things. To me, I'm not as big fan of the cost cap. I get what they're trying to do here, but at the same time, I'm just not a big fan of it. I think the private equity thing with the 20-30% is very interesting. I'll give you that. I have no issue with that. But going back to the France family thing, I don't know why the France family would be allowed to buy into a charter. It just wouldn't make any sense. It's a major conflict of interest, and I think it's going to have some major implications and major problems going forward. So I really hope that they make some changes to this so this isn't a big talking point, but I do have a funny and bad feeling that this is going to end up taking place where they're going to have a way of this ending up happening, unfortunately, to be honest with you. And now we'll go ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chase Briscoe. Now, Chase Briscoe spoke to the media yesterday regarding his 2024 plans. And he says he's still currently working on his 2024 plans. And he says it's really going to be based off how he runs throughout the rest of 2024, where he's going to end up. 25, I should say. Chase Briscoe, of course, is working on his contract for 2025 because he's a free agent. Because remember, it was announced about a week or two ago that Stewart-Haas Racing is going to be shutting down at the end of this season. And all four drivers, Chase Briscoe, Noah Gragson, Josh Berry, and Ryan Preece, are all looking for jobs currently going into the 2025 calendar year. Now, there's a couple teams that I think Chase Briscoe could end up with. There's 3 or 4 teams. The first one, of course, is RFK Racing. RFK Racing is an organization that is looking to expand going into 2025. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But the one thing that could hold that up from happening is RFK not buying a charter. And with charter costs being high around that $25 to $30 million range, though they are going for $20-25 million at the moment, that could hurt Brad Keselowski's opportunity to expand. So I'm not sure if that is going to happen. Another team is JGR. We've heard rumors that he could be a front-running candidate, take over the 19 car, but I really don't think that's where he is going to end up. I think the most likely organization that Chase Briscoe is going to end up in 2025 is the Wood brothers. He's been the frontrunner for the 21 seat for the last month or two, and here is why. Obviously, initially when rumors came out that at the time SHR was going to be downsizing a two-car operation, if they didn't have Tier 1 support, I thought that's when he was going to leave. But Harrison Burton has been struggling immensely, and I know some people say it's the car. Matt Benedetto made the playoffs with that car a few years ago. Also, Paul Menard was not that bad in the car, and Ryan Blaney made the playoffs and made it to the round of 8. I think it's more of the driver than basically the car itself. I get that the next-gen car is different than the Gen 6 car, but I do truly believe, and I'm not saying this out of disrespect for Harrison Burton, but Harrison Burton is not that great of a driver. He has struggled this year immensely. He's in the lower positions of the owner's points, and I don't think Harrison Burton is doing a very good job. And he even said this at Daytona, that this is a make-or-break year for him. So he really needs to step up to the plate and start performing a lot better if he's going to keep his seat. I think if you put Chase Briscoe in this car next year, that will be a much better ride for him, and I think he'll do a lot better. And I wouldn't be even surprised or shocked if he ends up making a playoffs, because I think Team Penske or Roush, if they go back into an RFK alliance, I think that Chase Briscoe is going to get that car into the playoffs. I know that's very bold to say, but I think we'll at least have a chance for the playoffs and will be a lot more competitive than Harrison Burton. Like I said, this is no disrespect to Harrison Burton. I think Harrison does have a little talent, but Harrison Burton is not cut out for the Cup Series. I think he would do a lot better racing in Xfinity or racing part-time in Cup and running full-time in the Xfinity Series. I really do, hope for Chase Briscoe that he finds a ride. He's got sponsorship from Mahindra, and he also does have sponsorship from High Point, so I'd imagine those sponsors are going to follow Chase Briscoe over to the Wood Brothers next year, which they're looking for sponsorship over at the Wood Brothers, but I don't think they're going to have big issues with that, looking for the sponsorship there. So I don't think there's going to be issues coming around here. I think Chase Briscoe will be able to find a ride, and like I said, more than likely goes over to the 21 next year and drives to the Wood Brothers, and they make that car a much more closer to a Tier 1 car starting in 2025. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but more than likely Chase Briscoe is headed over to the Wood Brothers in 2025. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Martin Truex Jr. Now, Martin Truex Jr. always gets asked this question every single week, it seems like. But he once again was asked by multiple media members, including Bob Pockers, on what his future is going to be looking like for 2025. He says he's getting closer to making a decision every single week, but there's still no decision on 2025. Now, Martin Truex Jr. did have a bad race this past week at Sonoma, and Bob thinks it could be at least play a little bit of role in maybe making a decision, but I don't think it's going to play a role. But Bob has reported recently in the last hour or so that he's getting closer to making his decision. And according to Bob reported even earlier today, in the business with Bob, Joe Gibbs wants Martin Truex Jr. to make his decision very, very soon. Now, I think this is a lot more complicated this year in 2024 than it is last year, because last year Martin Truex Jr. was performing very, very well, and he decided to come back for 2024, but he waited until August around the Michigan weekend. Joe is kind of tired of Martin waiting as long as he's had, because I know Martin said early in this year that he may not even make a decision until September. I think Joe wants Martin to make a decision a lot sooner so they can go after and pursue some drivers. Now, I think Martin Truex Jr., there is a good chance, and I think it's actually 50-50 if he comes back or retires. I'm leaning toward that he is actually going to come back in 2025 instead of retiring. I do think there's a chance to make a crew chief change, however, because James Small has not been doing a fantastic job as a crew chief. But I think Martin Truex Jr. more than likely is coming back and driving the 19 car next year. Now, if Martin Truex Jr. makes the decision to retire at the end of the year, who takes his place? Well, you of course got some drivers in the lower series. You do have Chandler Smith. Chandler Smith's been doing a really solid job in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year, has 2 victories, and has made a couple select starts last year for Colleague Racing. So I think he could be an option. I think he's one of the Toyota TRD replacement drivers if someone ends up getting injured as well. So I would imagine he's a front runner, and I think Chandler is one of the best up-and-coming talents in the sport currently at the moment. You also have Eric Almirola. Eric Almirola's been mentioned by Jordan Bianchi as a possibility, though we haven't seen Eric Almirola race since, I think, around the Darlington week, if I'm not mistaken, so I really don't know what happened there, but we don't know when the next race is for Eric Almirola currently at the moment. So I think that he could be a big candidate, and I think he'd do a decent job, but I don't think he'd do as good as Chandler Smith. Bob has indicated there's a couple other drivers. I already talked about Chase Briscoe being a potential possibility. Chase Briscoe, I think, would do solid, but I feel like Ford really likes him, so I don't see him going there. He's also mentioned Noah Gragson. Noah Gragson is another name that we've heard because of the Bass Pro connection. But I think that they're over there more for Bass Pro and not for Joe Gibbs, because we know that Kroger more than likely is coming over to Joe Gibbs Racing next year. So I think that they may not come over, and I think Noah's going to go to another organization, and we're going to talk about in a second. Then he also mentions Eric Jones. Eric Jones is another driver that's very interesting. He drove for Joe Gibbs Racing back in 2000, and basically for a lot of his career, made select starts in 2015, won a few Xfinity Series races, and then of course went full-time in 2016 Xfinity, almost won the championship that year, then went Cup Racing in 2017 in front of Chiroa, and ran a couple years with JGR and got a couple wins, including at Daytona and in the Southern 500. I think Eric would be a good driver to get, but I think Legacy wants to keep a veteran driver over there. So what I think is going to happen is I think Martin is actually going to come back next year. If Martin doesn't return, I think this is going to open up a huge possibility for major changes to come. But like I said, I think most likely Martin Truex Jr. does make a return. I think Martin has done a very good job this year, and I think they really want to keep him around going into the 2025 season. Because like I mentioned, I think Martin's a very, very good driver who always gets the best out of equipment and is always a championship threat and contender. So I do expect a decision to come very soon, and I do truly believe that Martin Truex Jr. is coming back to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2025 in the 19 car. If not, I think Chandler Smith is the most likely replacement. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about RFK Racing. Now, Brad Keselowski was speaking to media earlier this week on Friday, and he says he is still interested in expanding RFK Racing to a 3-car organization as early as 2025. Currently, RFK Racing has 2 full-time entries at the moment, Brad Keselowski in the 6 car and Chris Buescher in the 17 car. We know Chris Buescher is not going anywhere anytime soon because he signed a multi-year contract extension at the end of last season, and we got that confirmed during the Darlington weekend. Now, this is not the first time that Brad Keselowski has talked about expansion. They talked about potentially going to IMSA as early as 2025. They actually were spotted at the Sebring Pack not too long ago, and they've also talked about maybe bringing back the Xfinity Series program, and I wouldn't be surprised or shocked if they're that team that's getting involved with SHR's Xfinity program potentially going away. I wouldn't be surprised or shocked if Brad is getting involved with that as well. But Brad has been saying this for a while. He wants to bring RFK back to a 3 or 4 car organization in the future. And I would love to see RFK Racing expand. Now, they do have a part-time 60 entry they've ran with Cam Waters and David Reagan. And I don't know if Cam Waters has any more races scheduled. I think he would love to run a few more races with RFK, but there's no more races confirmed at the moment for Cam Waters at this time. I think that they could potentially expand. Now, who could they end up getting if they were to expand? Now, obviously, Cam Waters could be an option, but Cam confirmed not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, that he's going to be going back to Supercars full-time in 2025 because there were rumors and speculation that he was looking to maybe come over to NASCAR and race full-time. But obviously, he's going to be fully focused on trying to win a Supercars championship and help him build up the Ford program over there. Then you have some other drivers like Chase Briscoe. But I already mentioned a couple minutes ago, I think Chase Briscoe is going to go to the Wood brothers. You do have Cole Custer. Cole Custer has been a reserve driver for RFK in the last year or so, and Cole actually qualified the 6 car when Brad Keselowski was not at the track, and also I think for Chris Buescher, he qualified the car as well. I think Cole Custer, though, ends up at front row. Riley Herbst is another option. Riley has made starts for Front Row, has made starts with other organizations associated with Roush in the past, so Riley Herbst could be another option. I also could see a driver like Frankie Muniz or somehow Matt Benedetto or even Haley Deegan even have chances and opportunities to do this as well. Or the other option is Justin Haley. Brad really wants Justin Haley in the organization not too far down the road. And I think Justin Haley would be a really great option for RFK Racing. He's been doing a really good job this year with Rick Ware for their standards. I know today didn't go well for them at Sonoma, but I think that Justin Haley could be a very solid and great option to go with as well, especially when you look at performance and the pace that he's done. And he's done great things with Colleague in the past and always gets the best out of equipment. I think if they do expand to a 3-car program as early as next year, I think that Justin Haley's the most likely driver they go after. If not, they go after someone like a Riley Herbst. But I think Justin could also stick around with Rick Ware and continue trying to build that program up going into the future. Still, it's going to be very interesting to see how things play out in regards to this and what happens with the rest of silly season and RFK Racing. But like I already mentioned and said, I really would love to see RFK Racing expand to a 3-car operation. This is a team that's been building, and they've been the best 14 over the last couple of seasons. And I really like the direction where RFK is going currently at the moment. And I really hope they continue going down the direction that they've been going down very recently. So we'll see what happens in regards to the future of RFK Racing and what the team decides to do. But I do believe in the not too far down the road future, I do think that RFK Racing could expand and they go get someone bold in the future. Not Carl Edwards, obviously. I know people wanted Carl to come back, but he's not going to do that there. But I think that RFK Racing expanding would be a really good thing for the sport overall, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're doing a little bit of a silly season recap. Now, Bob Pockrass talked about some of these things in the Business with Bob. But Bob Pockrass also put up a really good article in regards to NASCAR silly season, and I'll be talking about some of the other big rumors and rumblings around silly season as well. Let's begin by talking about the 19 car. We already talked about the possibility of there being multiple drivers in the running if Truex Jr. does in fact end up retiring at the end of this season. We think that Chase Briscoe could be a candidate. We do think Erik Jones could end up being a candidate for that seat. And those are two of the candidates for the 19 car according to Bob Pockrass. Now that would be very interesting. Erik Jones, from what I understand, does have a multi-year contract with Legacy Motor Club, but he could go there and I think he'd be a really great option. Another driver that's been mentioned for the 19 car, like I said, is Noah Gragson. However, there's been a lot of talk and chatter that Noah Gragson may not go to that team with Bass Pro Shots sponsorship, but I've also heard that he could be in the running for a third Richard Childress Racing car. They have been rumored as a team that could be purchasing that fourth charter. We do know that 2311 Racing is expected to purchase one of those charters, and we do know that Trackhouse is expected to get one of those charters as well. And we know that Front Row has been confirmed as a team that will be a 3-car organization next year, which I think Josh Berry and Cole Custer, by the way, are most likely going to be the drivers they end up choosing next season. As for Noah Gragson, I think Noah Gragson will end up at RCR. Austin Hill confirmed very recently that he will not be retiring. There were rumors and speculation early in the year that Austin Hill was potentially going to retire at the end of this season. But Austin Hill confirmed, and Jordan Bianchi confirmed this a couple weeks ago, that Austin Dillon is not going to be retiring and he'll be staying in the 3-car. And Kyle Busch also confirmed not too long ago that he's going to be sticking around and driving the 8-car, especially if him trying to find a way to run the Indianapolis 500 next year. He's more than likely going to stick around. I think Noah Gragson goes to the 33 car. As much as I love Jesse Love and I wouldn't care for Austin Hill, I think both are great talents. I think that Noah Gragson would be a really great option for this team. I think they're looking to try to make that program a lot better. I know Will Brown could also be an option there, but I also think that Noah Gragson, with his Bass Pro connection and the money he brings, I think that's why he more than likely ends up going there next year. And I think he'll do an excellent and great job because he's been doing an extremely well job with Stewart-Haas Racing this year. Let's talk about 2311 Racing. Bubba Wallace, he's expected to sign a multi-year contract extension with 2311. Now, it's not confirmed how long the deal is going to be and when this is going to be officially announced, but many are expecting a decision is not too far down the road for Bubba Wallace to get an extension. We do know that Todd Gilliland has signed an extension with Front Row, as announced a couple weeks ago. We are expecting that maybe Cole Custer and Josh Berry are going to end up going there in 2025. We've heard rumblings that Call Racing maybe could sell a charter this year, but Chris Rice has denied the rumors that Call Racing is going to sell a charter at the end of this season. So let's talk about Trackhouse Racing because this is the other big storyline to kind of go over. Trackhouse is expected to be a 3-car operation next year. Ross Chastain is officially confirmed to be back with Trackhouse next year because he does have that long-term deal. Let's talk about Daniel Suarez. Daniel Suarez spoke to Bob Pockrass on a one-on-one with him. He kind of does every single week. And Daniel Suarez did confirm that he is expected to sign a multi-year contract extension with the team this year. Daniel Suarez, while he's been struggling at times this year, he's had some good performances, but generally it's been really not that great of a year. And many are questioning why to get the extension. Well, one, Justin Marks and Pitbull and everyone over at that team at Ty Norris really like Daniel Suarez because they feel like he's an ambassador for the team and organization. He's helped that organization grow from the start. He's been there from the get-go, and I think he'd do an excellent and great job with the team. So Daniel Suarez, he's expected to sign an extension. Now Trackhouse has a really difficult decision to make between Shane Van Gisbergen and Zane Smith. Both drivers under contract for next year with the organization, or so we think. According to Bob Pockers and even Adam Stern touched on this as well, it sounds like that Zane Smith could be the odd man out at Trackhouse Racing, and Shane Van Gisbergen could be going full-time. Let's first talk about Zane Smith. Zane Smith, I think, will find a ride for next year, and most likely that is going to end up being with Kaulig Racing. I don't think Trackhouse is going to move him in fully in the house, unfortunately. I think that Zane is a very talented driver. There's no question about that. And to be fair, the last couple of weeks, he's been performing a lot better. However, generally this year, it has been a massive struggle for the driver of the 71 car. Now, to be fair, I think they're giving him the 77 scraps that guys like Todd Gilliland had last year, but he's been struggling for the most part so far in 2024. And you look at the guy they're talking about, Shane Van Gisbergen. SVG, in my opinion, is one of the best all-around drivers in the world. If you have the option between SVG and Zane Smith, I'm going to go with Shane. Shane has not only been getting better throughout the year and getting better on ovals especially, but he's been arguably the best road racer this year. He should have won Circuit of the Americas and also has won back-to-back. He's actually won the last couple road course races he ran. He, of course, won at Portland, got his first win last week. And then, of course, he won at Sonoma and will be looking to go 3 in a row. And we know that he is going to be the guy to be on road courses. And he's got sponsorship funding as well. Red Bull is really helping in a big way at the moment. And, of course, you do have WeatherTech that's sponsoring him as well. I think Trackhouse is going to go for Shane next year. And you look at Shane's age too. Shane is 35 years old. So Shane wants to go Cup Series racing. I feel like if you want to move him up, you got to move him up now. And I think that's exactly what is going to happen next year. So I think Zane will end up at Kaulig Racing in 2025. And I think that Shane Van Gisbergen most likely is going to end up full-time with Trackhouse next season. So I think the lineup for Trackhouse is going to be Ross in the 1. The 99 car will be Suarez. And Shane Van Gisbergen will take that number 97 car up to Cup next year. We'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to the rest of the silly season. But I do truly believe that that will be the lineup for Trackhouse Racing in 2025. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, does go live on my channel. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. You think Shane Van Gisbergen is going Cup racing next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And where do you think Noah Gragson ends up? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have potentially the entry list video for Iowa, and if any major news breaks, we'll cover here on the channel. Then, of course, on Wednesday, we're going to have a NASCAR news video. We'll also have the Xfinity Series race picks for Iowa, for Xfinity. And then on Thursday, we'll have Cup race picks for Iowa. If any major news breaks throughout the week, we'll have it here on the channel. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.